Okay, so today I am super excited for my guest. This is Summer, who was my previous boss, but now has become so much more than that. She became a friend and now basically family. And both of us are HR professionals. And something that we're really excited to talk about today is toxic work environments. We've both had the privilege to work in healthy work environments, but also some toxic work environments. And we feel like we could really benefit from discussing some of these things and ways to kind of work through that in order to stay motivated in your job.
Yeah. Thanks for
So,
having me, Anna.
yes. So I thought we could start from the employee's point of view and how, if you're the employee, how you work through being in this toxic work environment.
Yeah, I think toxic work environments are definitely something that you see a lot of people talking about lately, most especially on social media, TikTok, Instagram. You see all of those reels of people, silent quitting or doing these little reels on them just being fed up and just saying, I'm out of there, I'm not putting up with this anymore. But I'd like to challenge people on being part of the solution instead of just saying, I'm fed up and leaving. Sometimes people don't even have the option of leaving. What if maybe they're working at the only employer in town? Or maybe at the best company to work for in maybe their neck of the woods, right? And they don't have a choice but to stay in that environment. I would challenge people to leverage their positivity and their productivity to kind of maybe switch it up a little bit instead of just giving up and leaving. The grass is not always greener on the other side. Toxic work environments and cultures and managers are everywhere.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
don't just exist at the company that maybe you're currently at. And so, like I said, I would challenge people to be part of the solution instead of just adding to an already toxic culture. In fact, I think all of those people on TikTok or social media who are complaining about it are probably contributing to the toxic culture that exists in their company. And positivity can really go a long way. And so, what I would say is learn how to cope. Learn how to build a positive circle, which is what I think that we learned how to do, even in our own work environment. And so, studies actually show that the highest paid person in a company is not necessarily the smartest. It's actually Mr. or Miss Congeniality. It's the most well liked person that actually is the highest paid person. And people who are well liked tend to be pretty positive. So learn how to cope with adversity. Learn how to kind of weather the storms. And how do you do that? Right? So, yeah. Are
I think
there some tips or tricks, Anna, that you remember in your day to day that helped you get through maybe some tough times? Can you
Yeah.
remember anything?
Yeah, so I think you hit on something huge, and that's like creating this circle for yourself at work, right? We spend so many hours of our lives at our workplace, whether that's physically there or remotely there. And you're spending sometimes more time with those people than your own family throughout the day. And I think that your circle can be the biggest impact on you, whether that's positive or negative. When you are in this environment and your circle is complaining every day and they're miserable and they're not happy to be there and they have bad things to say about other people, that makes your mindset go there. That's what you're surrounding yourself with. And I think that doing the opposite also, so we're surrounding ourselves with the positive people and the people who are like driven and they're here and they're like, you know what, that's crappy, but let's move forward, and let's still get the job that we have to get done. That uplifts you too. And so I think it's really important to think about who's in your work circle and how they're contributing to how you feel. I think too that when things are negative, it's very easy to go down this spiral, right? And then we end up in a rabbit hole. And like you said, the grass isn't always greener. So then you are like, I'm going to get a new job. I'm out of here. See you later. And then you're going to run into this later in your career. It might not be your next job, but you're going to. Unfortunately, like you said, these toxic work environments or poor managers are all too common nowadays. And so I think that biggest part of it for me when we were going through it is like having that core circle and those, in our case, it was women to help lift each other up and to be able to vent in a safe space and be like, this is not fun, but let's let go of that and let's move forward and let's lift each other up. And I think that's the biggest piece as an employee on how to work through that toxic work environment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So surround yourself with positive people. I think that is one of the first steps to combating a toxic work environment, right? Getting into a healthy mindset. And I know, people can definitely pick out the negative Nellies in the workplace. And look, every day can't be a great day, but you can definitely limit the amount of negative talk, negative mindset that you expose yourself to, limit that. Have a safe circle where you can have a moment to vent in a safe space, but limit that exposure that you give yourself to that too. And then bounce back from it pretty quickly. Another thing is coping with adversity. I think that our culture nowadays doesn't know how to cope with having a difference in opinion, right? I think that, debating healthfully is something that doesn't occur very often. Having a difference in opinion is no longer okay. Everybody has to agree on the same thing. And if you don't, we don't know, like we malfunction nowadays, you
Yes.
know? And so creating again a psychologically safe space where people still respect each other when they have a difference in opinion. I can think of so many times where together as a team, we would come together and process something and we would still have a difference in opinion. And sometimes the conversation would get heated, but afterwards we'd say, okay, we agreed to disagree. Now where we're going to go for lunch,
Yes.
right? And sometimes people who were maybe not part of our department or our team would be like deer in the headlights and be just stunned at the fact that we could disagree and still be friends and want to hang out and have lunch afterwards because that's so uncommon nowadays, right? And that there's no hard feelings, that we're still professionals, and even beyond professionals, we're still friends and we respect one another. And so I think, again, step two in combating a toxic work environment is learning how to cope with a difference of opinion and still respect people, most especially when that's coming from executives or people in authority. You have to learn how to get past that. And the faster you can get past that, the faster you can mentally and emotionally move forward so that you can focus on your work, you can focus on your project and get things done. A lot of people get stuck emotionally and then they spend all their time and energy focused on that their productivity just plummets. And being able to bounce back from that takes so much time and energy that they're just exhausted and wiped out, that the idea of going into work is just so overwhelming and it's not fun, that their engagement goes down, their passion for what they do goes down, and then no wonder they don't want to go to work, right?
Yeah.
But then it's the company's fault that they hate their job. But it really is just this idea of just not knowing how to cope with a difference of opinion or disappointment it really has an emotional toll where people just get drained. And a lot of it came out of, I think, too, excuse me, COVID and just the emotional whiplash. And this is a really great segue into, as a leader, I feel like the responsibility you have in really managing your team in a healthy way. And that is, how do you build a emotionally safe atmosphere for your team to learn how to cope with some of the things that are coming up, you know? And so I feel like as a leader and a manager, it's really your responsibility to keep an atmosphere that's super healthy. So for employees who are learning how to thrive in a toxic work environment, the onus is on you to keep that positivity, right? For a manager, the onus is on you to keep a healthy work environment where employees feel safe, first and foremost, to be vulnerable, to trust that regardless of how they feel, that they can be vulnerable and honest about what they're struggling with so that they can bounce back and they can do their work, right? Because as a manager, that's what I'm expecting them to do, is to come to work and to get the job done.
And then I
And
think
so,
that hits
yeah.
on kind of what you were sharing about, this healthy debate, right? And I think so many people look at that as confrontation. And with the culture right now, and I think post COVID, nobody wants to confront, right? And so when the manager is able to create this healthy environment for the team, I think that pushes more people to be able to have this healthy debate, right? We're not sitting in there pulling each other's hair out and screaming at each other, but we're really debating what each of our beliefs are and why we think it should be done this way or how we should roll something out. And I think far too many people nowadays are, this is the way I want to do it and that's it. And it's like, no, you have to kind of vouch for yourself. And this is why I think it would work. And you're going to sit there and hear other people's opinion, be like, wow, I never thought of it that way, or other vice versa, right? So I think when your leadership or your manager is able to create that space, it allows for more of this healthy debating, which I think is something you just have to jump into. And I know that doesn't sound fun, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you will be with it. And it's like you kind of rip the Band-Aid off once you have that healthy space and dive into this debating with each other and being able to, not just focus on yourself. This is something big, and I know you're probably going to laugh that we talked a lot about, talked about a lot, is like you're not just trying to get you across the finish line when you are part of a team in your work environment. You need to be comfortable with helping everyone get across the finish line, because at the end of the day, it's not about you. And there was a time in my career that I very much had that opinion, and you were like, we're getting this whole team across. And it makes you really turn inside and think about the members of your team and really look at them as more than your coworkers. Like, this is a person, Jane Doe is a person. They have feelings, they have emotions, they have a life outside of this building when they walk out of here. And when you're able to do that, I feel like it just so much more contributes to creating this healthy environment.
What you just said, Anna, is so key. We talked about the employee who quits because they said that they're sick of the toxic work environment. Well, what you just said gets that employee who's complaining about the toxic work environment promoted to the manager. It gets them promoted to the executive. Because what that lesson they just learned is, instead of complaining about the toxic work environment, they instead learned how to cope, leverage their positivity and their productivity. Not only that, but then they became an influence in their team in getting everyone across the finish line. And I guarantee you, they became Mr. and Mrs. Congeniality. They also probably became the most productive person on that team. They also probably got the company to look at them, and now other companies outside of that company are looking at them, most especially if they're in a specialized industry. And now they got other companies probably wanting to hire them as well. So that person, instead of leaving and complaining because they were negative, now has probably tripled the value for themselves and is now employee number 1, 2, and 3. And that right there was just the key. Instead of making these reels on TikTok and complaining about toxicity, they've now just upped their value as a top employee and performer.
Yeah. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. Those people then become the leaders and the managers in the company. And I think when you're in those roles, like you shared a little bit earlier, that is now your responsibility. When you're overseeing a team, you need to be able to do that and be able to zoom out and not be selfish and look at the whole team and the whole company and be able to help the people under you move forward and push forward. Because if that's happening and all the gears are working together, that's when you're going to propel forward, not just as a team, but also individually. And that's where your growth comes from. And
Right.
I know it's so cliche, but like you're not growing when you're comfortable. And like you shared, so many people want to be like, that's it, I'm out of this toxic work environment, peace. There is growth to be had in every toxic work environment that you could think of. There's an opportunity for you to grow and learn something. And it might just be that, hey, I don't want to be that manager one day. I don't want to work in a company like this one day. Even if that's the tidbit you take out of it, there's growth in there. And so when you're uncomfortable, I really want to challenge people to say, what am I learning? And what am about myself or about the professional world right now in this moment? Because there's going to be something there to take away.
Yeah. And I think we're sharing these things because we were all at that moment ourselves. We're all at that crossroads ourselves where we could have been that TikToker or that Instagrammer who could have made that reel and said, I'm out of here, I'm not putting up with this anymore. But instead, we chose to self-reflect and say, no, do I want to be contributing to this toxic work environment or do I want to be a part of the solution, right? And I think, we took a deep breath and we said, no, I want to be part of the solution. And what do I need to do to get everyone across the finish line? And it's been so rewarding, looking back now at a 15 plus year career and now as an HR executive, the most fulfilling thing as an HR leader was the team that I got to build, and just the reward for me was seeing the aha moments that you and so many other people have. That is the win for me, is seeing how successful other people are. And if that's not a win for you, then this probably is not the career that people should be in. Seeing other people become successful and then they turn around and pay it forward to others, that's just like so fulfilling. And that's what I was going to say for a manager who's combating a toxic work environment. That's what you're doing now, is you are duplicating that by building teams and teaching other leaders how to do this, by building, healthy teams, creating safe work environments. And when you're able to do that, wow. I mean, it's just so rewarding, which is why we're even having this conversation right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what you hit on, like that it's rewarding for you to watch other people succeed and it's rewarding for you to see other people grow and learn in these aha moments. I think we get too far into, I'm getting promoted and I'm going to get a raise and I'm going to be a manager, but what does that really mean at the end of the day? And I think there's a lot of people out there that really need to understand why they're in that role. And is it just for the money? Is it just because you want to have a manager title? Because I feel like when you oversee people, you have to have the mindset that you just described in order for it to not be toxic, right? You have to care about others. You have to care about their successes and their learning and growth. And as the manager, you're going to play a pivotal part in everyone that you work with's career, whether you think so or not. And it's up to you if you want to make that positive or negative, because I've had both, right? I feel like we all have. And I've definitely grown more in the environments where I'm put in a healthy situation and given, some leeway to fall, and make mistakes, but to be like, this is what I just learned from this. And how are we going to all pick this up?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say as a leader, one of two things are really, really critical in leading your team. The first thing is be generous. Be generous with your team. And when I say be generous, share with them. Share with them the tidbits, the things that you've learned along the way. You know, kind of show them the ropes. What are some of the secrets? What's the secret sauce to certain things? So yeah, don't be stingy with those things. Give them a leg up. Don't throw them in the deep end and say, you know, sink or swim kind of a thing. Give them, you know, give them the secrets. But also be vulnerable. We've all watched the famous TED Talk by Brene Brown on vulnerability. So share with them because that's what creates the safe work environment. You know, if you have a boss who's only showing what a rock star they are and how awesome they are at presentations or public speaking or this great project that they rolled out, you're setting such a high standard for that team that they're thinking they have to be performing at that same level or else they're not going to be enough, right? But if you're showing them the, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then they feel like, oh, okay. Like how many times, Anna, which there haven't honestly been that many. I can think of way more wins that you've had than mess ups. But it's kind of like, okay, Summer. So in our one-on-one, I kind of did this, and it's like, okay, what happened? Well, I kind of did right, and it's like, okay, you did it. Let's move on. We're not going to do it again, right? Like your overachievers are going to beat themselves up way more than you ever could. Okay? It's actually the underachievers
Yeah.
that don't take accountability. Okay? Those are the ones you want to get off your team really fast.
Yeah.
Okay? They stick out like a sore thumb. You don't want those on the team. Okay? But the overachievers, the high performers, the ones that take accountability, like those are the ones that are going to beat themselves up way more than you ever could. So it's a quick one-on-one, what happened? Okay, you don't need to beat them up. You don't have to humiliate them. They are already beating themselves up way more, you know? And so it's a quick one-on-one conversation. What do you learn from it? And let's move on,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes back to like the vulnerability piece that you're talking about. And I think another aspect of like the vulnerability piece is at the end of the day, there's still a job to get done. And if you're lucky enough to have a team and work in a team setting, which I feel like most people are, everyone is going to have strengths and weaknesses. And you still have to get the job done. But I feel like you did a very good job of making sure we all played to our strengths. And it just worked out that some of our strengths were other people's weaknesses and vice versa. And it created this balance. And so I think when you're in that leadership role, you have to be able to really sit and get to know your team members and understand them and, you know, what motivates them and what doesn't. And, you know, what keeps them going at the end of the day. And what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? Because when you're able to help those people and play on those strengths, that's when you have people who are more engaged. And that's when you're having those wins and success because you're putting people in the right positions. It's almost like
Right.
playing football or something, right? Like you can't put, I'm not even going to try and go there. We're just not going to go there. But knowing your
No, you're right.
position. So I
Yeah,
think
I,
that
I
that's,
am not a football fan. I don't know it, but I've learned that it is highly strategic, a lot more than the hut
yeah,
bend over and throw a ball kind of thing. I
yeah.
don't get it, but it's very strategic. HR, believe it or not, is super, super strategic. At least the HR that I've come to love and know. It is a lot more than orientation and paperwork and all of that. It's very strategic. And when you're talking about people, people are so unique They really are. And no person is the same as the other. And when you're putting a bunch of people together with unique strengths and needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs, it's a really cool puzzle to try and figure out. And I think that we had one of the most amazing puzzles. It was a well oiled machine. And I would go to war any day with that machine. I used to joke around quite a bit saying, bring on Google, Amazon, whatever. Like our little team could take on any mega company. And it wasn't because we had the best resources or the highest degrees. It was just because we had such an amazing amount of trust in one another. And I think that that is, I mean, I'll just put us up against special forces. Okay, that sounds nuts to do that. But if I think about a special forces unit, like a Navy SEALs team, the amount of trust that I would imagine that team has is the type of trust that I think that we had. You talked about us being like a family. That's the level of trust where it wasn't about a position or who the leader was. It was about what's the end goal. Nothing is too high or too low of a position or a task to do. We'd lick an envelope, we'd fix a doorknob, we'd clean a toilet. I mean, there was no job or task, so long it wasn't illegal or unethical, that we wouldn't do, And if there was some kind of conflict, we'd take care of it, and then we weren't afraid to talk about things. There was no topic or subject matter that we wouldn't respectfully, discuss at an appropriate time as well.
Right.
Sometimes things were 911 and it just needed to be handled. And then when time permitted and it was appropriate, we'd talk about it.
Yeah. And how do we prevent that again? And I feel like that kind of segues into HR being such a unique position in your company, in any company. I feel like it's kind of this filter, right? Because we're going to hear from the employees and what's going on that end of things. And then it's kind of us. And then you have the executives. And they're throwing stuff at us to roll out with the employees, or the employees are telling us stuff that they're not happy about with the executives, right? And so it's a really fun and challenging position to get to be in. And so I want to talk a little bit about being an executive and maybe hearing that people think your workplace is toxic, and kind of what to do about it then. I think one of the biggest things that you have taught me is don't ask the people for their opinions if you're not going to listen to them. And this doesn't mean that whatever your employees are suggesting, you just do automatically. You're like, yep, you all want to work from home for the rest of the time? Great, go ahead. It's taking the time to take those requests and sit down and have conversations on why or why not this stuff is happening. Because your people are what makes you your success in your company, right? They're in the everyday, they're in the trenches, they're doing the work. And so they're going to have ideas that they want to put out there and see. So I think that's one of like the biggest things that you've taught me, but I know you can probably speak a little bit more on this.
Yeah, wow. That's a great question, because you're right. HR is kind of the middleman. And I think that there are definitely perspectives that an employee might not understand from an executive perspective. And there's definitely things that an executive from an employee's perspective might not understand, right? And it's just a really unique balance as the middleman that you kind of have to wear both hats. You have to empathize with the employee, and then from a very corporate professional level, have to also understand from an executive. Let's start from the executive perspective. From an owner perspective, I cannot even imagine the weight on someone's shoulders, the responsibility of employing hundreds of families livelihood, lives, the responsibility. That is a tremendous burden and responsibility that unless I'm a business owner someday, I'm just never going to understand, right? And there's so many factors to take into consideration regarding that. And sometimes you just have to pray and believe that the decisions that you're making are the best ones, right? And there, again, like I said, so many factors you have to take into consideration: cost, the environment that you're currently in, what's going on. I mean, I can't even imagine during COVID some of the factors you have to take into consideration during that time. And then from the employee's perspective, I love what you brought up in the sense of, asking your employees. Surveys, employee surveys. Wow, don't ask unless you're going to do something about it, right? I mean, as an HR executive, that is definitely something I've told my exec team quite a few times on. Let's not roll out a survey unless you're going to follow up in a timely manner and definitely do something about it. Otherwise, you lose your reputation with your people, right? In rolling out a survey, because if you're not going to do anything about it, then they're not going to answer honestly, or they're not going to even bother taking the survey next time. So I don't even know if I really have a great answer other than, what are you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say too, it doesn't always have to be this grand survey. That might intimidate some people in these roles. While that is easy for some companies and maybe harder for others, sometimes it's just a one-on-one conversation. And if you want to get technical, maybe something like a stay interview. But I feel like I've been watching, I feel like I can say this, but my husband and his job and things that he's going through, I've been watching people leave a company for things so small. And it's like, if somebody would have just asked them, you know what I mean? Or just had that conversation so they could understand the why behind the what. Well, a survey is great and we've seen the success of that. If that's not something you can do, it's just talking to people and getting to understand, what is going on in the day-to-day work environment that is working or isn't working, and what are their pain points, and understanding that there's things you're going to be able to fix and there's things you're not going to be able to fix. But just knowing that they have a voice and they've been heard, sometimes that's enough.
That's so profound. I'm sitting here trying to think of what's the most trendiest answer right now. I'm going into like my SHRM, like Rolodex right now. It's 2024. What's the hot answer? And I really like that, Anna. And I'm actually thinking about, what did I do with our team? And I think your answer is really right. I actually didn't even do stay interviews. It actually just leaned on the relationship that I had with you guys, which was just being transparent. Transparent, to the extent possible. What's going on? What's important for you guys? What's happening in your personal lives that I know is important? And how do I keep you engaged? How do I keep you engaged in work to a point that it's meaningful?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. As a manager or as a leader, stay in touch with your employees to a point that it's meaningful.
Yeah. And I think too, when you have those, we talked about the overachievers, right? And that's your ideal team. You want to have overachievers there.
Yep.
They want to learn and grow. And I think something that you did very well with us is that you had to set goals. And some of them were tough, but you were like, nope, this is what you're going to push for. And I'm not going to name names, and I know she would laugh, but we would sit down and talk about these goals, and some of our team members would be like, I think I do that really well. So I don't know what you're talking about. But you really challenged us, I think, to both look inward and then also think about our learning and growth in maybe a SHRM setting, or, getting a new certificate or challenging ourselves in that educational space. And I think when you have overachievers on your team, they're going to get bored. Like, you need to keep them enticed and you need to provide them opportunities for learning and development. And I think that's another big piece that goes along with those kind of stay interviews or those one-on-one conversations that you're having is understand the trajectory of their career and what they're wanting to get out of it. Because if you can tailor to that, great, and you got them. If you can't, I think it's really important to be upfront and saying, you know what, I don't think that that's going to be possible here, or we don't have that environment. Because I think also so many people spend time in there, and then when they find out, oh, there's no room for me to move up, and I'm just going to be at this level, that's when you lose people also.
Yeah, I think that is one of the toughest things as a manager and a leader that you have to face. You have to be honest with yourself when you have reached the end of your road with your overachiever. Because there's everything in you that's going to want to keep that employee, but you have to be honest with yourself on can you? And it's not fair to them if you're trying to hold on to them because you're just being selfish, right? I think that that would be borderline unethical, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because I feel like we did that a little bit, right? I was living where we were working, and I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to move. And you were like, well, that's terrifying and I hate it, but I have to let you spread your wings.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really respected, because it's also too, as the leader, you don't get blindsided by it, right? You guys kind of talk through it and you have this plan and you can have that transition. And if you want that person to be there and a part of training, you can help create the next person for this role. But when you're not having those conversations and it's not transparent, then you get blindsided by somebody putting in their 2 weeks notice and you're scrambling to fill a position that needs to be filled.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I know we could sit here and talk about this all day long and go all which ways. But I'm excited to kind of share this with everyone and get some feedback on this, and definitely circle back and maybe have another chat about, just the professional work environment and how to navigate different things, because I feel like so many people are going through these struggles, or this is their day to day. And if they could just hear a little bit of this positivity and a little bit of these ideas to maybe implement in their workforce, that's the goal.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for inviting me. It was fun chatting with you.
Thank you.
Bye.